Alright everyone, we're trying something new here. Let's review Spider-Man Brand New Day. I've been itching to talk about Marvel and Pokemon and House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones world and all these different things. I love that sort of content. I think a lot of you do too, because every time I bring it up in piece of football content, if you are watching this and you don't know that I do football content, though I have no idea how you'd have stumbled across this, that's what I mainly do on the Gooniverse and Football First. But I wanted to talk about Spider-Man Brand New Day. Spider-Man is by far and away my favourite superhero, but by a country. I think the Marvel Cinematic Universe I got into because of the hype generated and the build-up, and, it just became such a pop culture phenomenon. I got caught up in it. But Spider-Man, I've watched all the Tobey Maguires, all the Andrew Garfield films, which I also think are very good and very, very underrated. I'm really glad that Andrew Garfield kind of saved his rep as a Spider-Man in No Way Home, and people started to realise, actually, this guy's not so bad. But I've also loved the Tom Holland movies, so I was so excited when I knew that he was going to get a new set of films. This is the first in what I believe is to be a set of appearances. There's some spoilers at the end, but it is made pretty clear that we are going to be seeing more Tom Holland as Spider-Man. So yeah, I'm a huge Spider-Man fan, and I'm really excited to talk about this film on what is essentially, a new channel, a new strand of content. It won't be regular content, it will just be when I've got things to talk about in the world of, all those things I mentioned. So hit the subscribe button if you are interested, but I can't promise I'll be uploading as regularly here as I am, football content, which is near enough daily on both other channels. But I couldn't help myself but have to speak about this. So welcome to something a little bit different. Give me feedback in the comments below. Give me some thoughts on how to make these reviews better. I've never done anything like this before, and I want to learn. I want to improve. When I do talk about other things in future, we could build a community of people who enjoy these other things in the same way I do too. So welcome to James B. More James B. I don't even know if I'm going to name this, but we're having a little go at something different here. So I'm going to split this into spoiler-free and spoiler content. I think it's important I do go through some spoiler-free stuff. I've got my notes in front of me here. There'll be a lot of looking down away from the camera, apologies, but I don't want to miss anything, and I want to make sure I kind of hit all the main points, because this was a very rich film. This was very rich with colours, action, characters, plot threads, a backlog of information you need going into this movie. And I think that's probably the first thing I can say in this kind of spoiler-free bit is this wasn't a movie that reset the Spider-Man universe or the Tom Holland story at all, really. This was very much the fourth film in a trilogy that came before, and maybe they might do something with the word day like they did with the word home, Homecoming, Far From Home, No Way Home. They might do something with the day word, and that makes it a part of a new trilogy or a new set of films. But this was still very much the continuation of the story before. The memory loss of MJ and Ned, played by Zendaya and Jacob Batalon, I thought were fantastic. The world that he is in with the new Avengers. If you've seen Thunderbolts, you'll know what I'm talking about. So yeah, even though I'm doing the spoiler-free stuff, there's some stuff that you're going to have to know about, because it is a continuation of those things. Bruce Banner, aka Hulk, he's in this film, and you kind of got to have an idea of his dynamic with him. Not massively, but a little bit. So it's where No Way Home left us with Tom Holland Spider-Man in an apartment. Nobody knows who he is. No real family, no real help. He's having to do it alone. We thought we were getting kind of a real reboot of Spider-Man and a sort of start of Spider-Man doing very much street-level threats, blah, blah. And I think this movie, I think, toes the line nicely between street-level threats. Spider-Man can deal with this, and that's made very clear in a spoiler bit, which I'll talk about in a sec. But also, let's not pretend that he's not the guy now. He's very established as Spider-Man, and there's some big things going on, and it's not kind of, Spider-Man villains have never been simple, but this is certainly one of the more complex plot threads we've ever seen in a Spider-Man movie, in my opinion. But I thought it was great. I really, really enjoyed it. I think this is one of Tom Holland's best Spider-Man films. I think it's one of the best MCU films. It's certainly one of the best MCU films post-Endgame. I think there's no question of that. I really liked Shang-Chi. I really liked Thunderbolts. And movies that others didn't love so much, I loved No Way Home. People are critical after a little while of that movie. I thought the Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness was pretty good. But there's been some real dross, like Quantum Mane and things like that. I definitely think this was maybe the best entry into the MCU since we had, Endgame and the big climax of the Infinity Saga with the Avengers. So, amazing Spider-Man film. Probably Tom Holland's best. I think it might even be better than No Way Home, but No Way Home will always just have a nostalgia, and for obvious reasons will have the love and affection from the fans that you can't top unless you do that again in a different way. So this movie has to really rely on a brilliant story and brilliant production, and it was. As I go through the rest of my spoiler-free review, I want to say the colours in this were fantastic. The action, now apparently they took inspiration from the Spider-Man video games coming out. Well, there was one on PS4, PS5. I've played those games. I've certainly played the first one, a lot of the second one. There are a lot of action shots. There are a lot of sort of one kill shots, as they say in video games, but a lot of final actions and sort of moves that they've taken to really bring Spider-Man to life and show how brilliant he is. And while I don't really think there's much of a spoiler, he's got kind of the web grenades that he throws and it captures sort of the villains in the web. It's little things like that where you're thinking that's really, really cool. And there's lots of action shots and lots of things that Tom Holland does, Spider-Man Peter Parker does, that show the evolution of his character, show that over the 4 years or however long it's been since MJ and Ned have gone to MIT, they've gone to uni, and he's been dealing with street level threats, he's just been a Spider-Man on his own. You see how much he's developed and just how much better he is, and how much also Marvel have grown with this character and really pushed the boundaries of what they can do with Spider-Man, how good and how powerful he can be. I thought that was all really, really cool. Like I said, picks up from No Way Home. This isn't sort of... I don't think you can go into this movie having never really seen a Spider-Man film. Like, I watched it with my girlfriend, my brother and his girlfriend, and she didn't really know what was going on, and I knew I had to just fill her in quickly on, like, this is what has sort of happened, what we need to go into this movie, because it wasn't really just another Spider-Man film. It's come out 4, 5, 6 months before Avengers Doomsday. I need to forget the name for the sec. Avengers Doomsday. It was going to have some sort of bigger impact on the plot because there's quite a lot of filler going into Avengers Doomsday. But again, while I think this is spoiler free, I don't think they did too much to link it necessarily to that movie. This was very much its own story too. And that's pretty much it on the spoiler-free stuff. So we'll go into the spoilers, which is going to spoil the plot, my thoughts on some of the main characters. Just general stuff that I don't think you'll want to know before you've seen the movie yourself. So, plot. I think he's dealing with 4 main issues. It's Peter Parker, Tom Holland's Peter Parker. The loneliness is a big thing. I think it amazed me how much... by the way, spoilers have started, just to be very, very clear. Loneliness is a big one, and I think it surprised me how much Aunt May was in this. They clearly brought back the actress to really... for her to have a real kind of importance. They don't, he's often bringing flowers to where she's buried or her memorial, and he is a memorial site, and he is like... That is fundamentally a part of Peter Parker's Spider-Man to this day. Like, they don't leave that behind. There's no Happy Hogan. There's no mention of Tony Stark. There's a little bit of a mention of the Avengers, a little bit. But so while a lot of stuff is kind of cast aside, Aunt May and that is kind of very prevalent still. His powers is developing arachnid powers, in which he's becoming more spider-like, he's evolving, and he's producing organic webbing. I thought the handling of that was really cool, because I found that quite, I just like coming out the wrist is very uncomfortable to watch. Like, and I think, even people around me were like, oh, I don't really like it. I think they handled that really, really well. And his development with the eyes, the powers, the lack of control, the headaches, I really like the way they kind of evolved his powers. I think this would have been a good moment to include a little bit of... we never got an origin story. We never saw how he got his powers. He was kind of dumped into the MCU in Civil War, Captain America Civil War, and we're sort of just told, pretty much everything you've seen in the other Sony movies sort of happens to him here. I think this was an opportunity to maybe show us some stuff, to give us some insight into that spider and how it happened. And, you can kind of do in what is the start of maybe a new trilogy or a new set of movies. This was an opportunity to maybe include a little bit of origin story, but fine, wasn't needed, and it was such a long movie in which they included so much stuff. So maybe if that was an idea, I understand why they might not have done all that. He's juggling the friends element because they're back in New York, MJ and Ned. They're done with uni. You see him kind of following their lives through Instagram, and yeah, he's juggling sort of wanting to tell them, wanting to protect them, and all that. And then there's the main threat, who we find out to be Jean Grey. Now, I haven't seen an X-Men movie. I know you might click off this video immediately, and I apologize. While I'm so into like the MCU and all that, I know I need to go back and watch the X-Men movies. Apparently they're brilliant. But no, I mean, I know of them, I know of the main characters, and I know of certain kind of important plots and moments because we've now seen appearances from Wolverine in Deadpool. We've seen, is it Professor X? Again, you can see how kind of I'm not the best with it. We've seen him in Doctor Strange. So they've been trying to weave in the X-Men for a little while, and now we've got Jean Grey, who I'm sure you guys are more expert than I am, but has very cool mind powers in this particular movie. And I thought the handling of the mind control threat was brilliant. And this is a theme that Marvel have been pulling on for a little while now. When you look at Sentry in Thunderbolts, when you look at who else? We look at Wanda and the kind of the mysteriousness of Wanda, who is much more on the nose magical, but there's definitely like a mysterious threat to her in Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness. And also it's a theme in kind of pop culture at the moment where you've got what's his name in Stranger Things, Vecna. Again, very similar, which is ironic because Sadie Sink, who, by the way, is absolutely brilliant. Obviously, she was in Stranger Things. She's brilliant as Jean Grey in this. It was interesting that, well, I find it interesting where there's a threat that is more about the mind, is more about, it's less combative, and it's more about being able to do things that totally mess with the characters. And I think with Vecna, who I think was really underused in Stranger Things from that perspective, now you've got Sadie Sink's character as Jean Grey. You've had a little bit of that with Wanda and Sentry. I think these kind of characters who yet have other powers, when they've got that ability to make this a real kind of mind thriller in some way, or psychological thriller is probably what I'm trying to say, I think that makes for a really great threat, and I think it was handled really well. The constant jumping from people she was taking over their minds and the way they kind of did it with the throwing, it was all very dramatic, wasn't it? But it looked really cool. It was visually brilliant, and you were watching it thinking, how does Spider-Man stop this? Very much like with Sentry and Thunderbolts, it's about winning a mind battle and sort of getting in their heads in a different way and bringing them back. And that's how he wins a lot of this. Yes, he kind of overpowers at one point. He defeats a lot of villains with his sheer power. But again, how does he defeat Hulk? How does he defeat Jean Grey, or at least save her? It's basically by appealing to who they are as a character and winning them over from like a almost like an affection perspective, a trust me perspective, a I got you perspective. He's not punching his way out of trouble, which at one point the movie was telling you with these new arachnid powers, he's incredibly powerful, and it makes him far stronger and far more dangerous and far more unpredictable. And you're getting sort of Spider-Man 3 Tobey Maguire beats here with, he's way more stronger, he doesn't have to control it, maybe it's taking over, but he works really hard to, overpower that and then eventually embrace his powers. So that's kind of the mind control threat. Talking about juggling his increased powers, he goes and basically creates an inhibitor. And I'm going to talk about the things you have to accept, because there's certain things about this film that I'm a bit like, okay. He builds an inhibitor, puts it on the back of his neck. He talks to Bruce Banner, who is obviously the Hulk, and has similar kind of mutating powers. The mutation thing is interesting with X-Men and whatnot, but anyway. And yeah, he creates an inhibitor and he kind of gets control of it. And that's pretty much it. The friends stuff is interesting, so obviously he goes to the apartment and he's starting to get close to MJ and Ned in some capacity, but ultimately he's sort of forced to reveal his identity, and it all kind of comes out when he's protecting MJ because of the threat from Jean Grey. So all of that stuff I thought was handled really nicely. He doesn't go against what he's been so strong doing up to this point, which is hiding who he is from Ned and MJ to protect them, but eventually it starts to come out, and it comes out in, I think, a really good way, which we'll talk about more in a second. So, more spoilers. He asks for help from the Avengers or the new Avengers. He goes to Yelena's office, which is a kind of a hot tub. I think they handled humour really, really well in this movie. Yelena was very, very funny, and I'm glad that what they are doing in this film is accepting there are Like the Avengers are out there, Bruce Banner's out there. A lot of it happens in New York. We can't keep pretending that, or keep having movies where kind of no one shows up. Like, why in Thunderbolts was Spider-Man not there? I think it's things like that where they're really good at addressing that. And also, I really like the way in Bruce Banner's class, he goes, all right, I'll answer another question about the Avengers. And they go, why couldn't you just put the gauntlet on to create more food? You know, they are kind of being quite on the nose about certain things and addressing certain things, and I like that from the MCU. We may as well talk about the Hulk thing now then. So, he asked Bruce Banner for help. They come up with the idea, and he comes up with an idea which is approved by Bruce Banner. He's told it's very dangerous. You could create an inhibitor that focuses on suppressing certain powers in DNA. So it suppresses certain genes, DNA, whatever, which suppresses certain powers. This is where you have to just accept that there are some quite convenient things you just have to accept in the movie. So he's got all this tech. Where from? Is it leftover Stark Tech? Stark Tech? Did he build it all? Or did he, you know, where's it come from? He's got an AI that helps him, who's able to just figure out all this stuff. And like with Endgame, where Tony Stark comes up with, you know, time travel, he figures it out. And there's a computer who kind of does all the maths. You know, no one else has come up with this kind of inhibitor before, which would be a very useful thing in a world where people have all these powers and you want to stop people being able to use their powers. You know, it's one of those things where you just have to accept it. Now, if it's handled well and the movie's great, we will accept it. But, yeah, there's a little bit of that. He's supremely intelligent and the tech's all there for him to do it. So yeah, you'd have to accept a little bit of that. But when it comes to the fight with Hulk, because obviously Bruce Banner doesn't play a huge role in this in terms of helping him. You know, there's one conversation, but then he shows up after. I loved this scene. It wasn't just because it was a great scene with Spider-Man and the Hulk, but I think it went a long way towards fixing the Incredible Hulk as well. It went a long way, in my opinion, towards basically the Hulk. I don't want to say it became a bit of a joke, because I thought in Endgame he wasn't as bad as people said with the whole kind of half Bruce, half Hulk thing. But what they did was they kind of, and I know he's appeared in She-Hulk as well, but they basically said to you, listen, he can go back to Hulk form. He doesn't have complete control. Even when he is the Hulk, you know, there is still that rage and aggression. And also Spider-Man can't beat him. You know, he is losing. It's when he says, it's me, Peter Parker, I'm your friend. And Hulk kind of remembers, which makes you wonder, did the spell that Doctor Strange used work on Hulk? I don't know. And then he eventually loses, and the only reason he loses is because he obviously loses strength as he kind of regresses a little bit and he falls down. And I think this is also Marvel sidelining Hulk a little bit. They don't have him, in my opinion, for Doomsday. He might come later. Maybe he'll come for Secret Wars. But I think this is a way of basically sidelining him and explaining why he might not be in Avengers Doomsday, although he might be, I don't know. So I thought the fact that Spider-Man didn't beat, because when Spider-Man beat Doctor Strange in No Way Home, I was again a little bit like, oh, convenient, right? Like he figured it out. I think I'm glad he didn't beat Hulk. You know, Spider-Man is brilliant, but he's not meant to be super, super powerful. And then I guess we get on to kind of my final criticisms of the movie. Not really, they're not criticisms, but I think some of the big beats and twists were quite predictable, if I'm honest. And that's fine, doesn't mean they weren't very good. I just saw them coming. Let me know in the comments if you did. The MJ mind taker, when MJ was saying all that stuff on the roof in New York, I think I just knew immediately it's not her speaking, it's Jean Grey. Accepting that his changing powers were going to happen, taking off the inhibitor and embracing who he is and being super strong, I thought was handled well, but again, predictable. I completely saw that coming. Jean Grey was done wrong, something had gone on, she was being tested on. Again, you know, there was someone she knew behind the scenes that was, you know, that the whole, you know, who are you hiding, and Spider-Man not knowing and us not knowing, I thought that was totally predictable too. The fact that Damage Control were evil, I thought that was predictable. What I thought was a cool twist was the VMAX thing. I was genuinely like, who is VMAX? What's VMAX? Is it a weapon? But actually, the fact that it meant nothing, I thought was really, really interesting as well. So, yeah, I thought those beats were somewhat predictable, bar the VMAX thing, but was still very, very good. Final bits, the dynamic with Punisher I thought was great. I really, really enjoyed that. Is there a Miles Morales setup? I just wondered, maybe I'm doing too much, but I just thought that, I don't know, Miles Morales has, in the animated movies, which are great, has a family member who's in the police. We obviously know, I think, the character called Jean DeWolf, who's talking to Spider-Man. Kind of nice to know that he has kind of connections in the police. That feels like very much Spider-Man from the comics, Spider-Man from the video games. She was speaking Spanish at times. I wonder if that was a reference to Puerto Rico and maybe Miles Morales. But I do think she says her son's called Marley, EJ and Marley, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe not. I just wondered whether there were hints at it. There was the weapon that I wasn't sure whether Prowler or Shocker. He used it to fight Hulk at one point. Again, this is where I'm not the most clued up on all that stuff, but I just wonder whether there were hints to Miles Morales. Let me know in the comment section below whether you think there might be. And did Ned and MJ remember him? So my take on this, because we obviously see MJ, eventually she knows everything because of the letter, and she's holding the necklace. And then we see Ned at the end say, oh, Peter. Now, I think that was him just saying, you must be Spider-Man, as in, and I know your name is Peter, because MJ said it when you swung out. And I think MJ, has an affection for that necklace, but doesn't know why and is still trying to remember. Maybe the movie's going to go down the road of, it doesn't actually matter whether they remember or not, because these things happen. They know Spider-Man saved them. All these things still happen. They might not remember their friendship, but friendship is bigger than just memories. There's more connection there. And once they are basically told about it, it will be like nothing ever changed, and they will just accept what Peter Parker and Spider-Man tell them about their past. So I think that's probably how they'll handle it, because I don't think they will want to. I mean, the Hulk thing suggests that maybe there's a bit of memory there too, but I don't think they'll want Doctor Strange's, spell to be weak like that. I think it has to stand. They can just bring these two back into Peter Parker's life in a different way, and they were doing that with the building of a Lego puzzle and all that, So yeah, I think they're weaving that in really nicely. Final thing to say is the post-credit scene. Yeah, so again, while I'm no expert on all this, I think they're hinting at Battleworld, which is going to be the Secret Wars plot. So that tells me that Spider-Man probably won't appear in the New Avengers, which is a shame. I think, yeah, I that might happen in a different universe or a different world. I don't know. There's still a lot we have to learn about that. Maybe on a different planet. But I have a feeling that, Yelena said we're handling kind of a bigger problem right now. So I wonder whether that's sort of overlapping in some way. I think they're hinting in that post-credit scene to a Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, or maybe an Andrew Garfield one too, appearing on Battleworld, because there's the new detection on another planet, which, according to the comics, is where a lot of the multiversal characters all fought in the Secret Wars plot in the comics. So, like I said, this was a spoiler-related video. Maybe I should have explained that particular spoiler there, but I think that's what they're hinting at in the what's it called, in the post-credit scene, but I'm not 100% sure. Okay, those are my thoughts on the movie. I don't know if I've done this justice in any way, shape, or form. I've just word vomited everything I felt about the movie with some pointers. In short, I thought it was great. I'll give it a 9 out of 10. And that might, it's really 8.5/9 out of 10. I thought it was great. I loved it. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comment section below. Yeah. Anything I've missed, let me know, and I will comment in the comment section and reply to certain things, give you thoughts on anything I've missed. I've really enjoyed it. Hope you've enjoyed this review. Hope I've done it some justice in some way. If you want more of this kind of content, let me know, but it will just be as and when there are things to talk about in this nerdy world that I love to follow. All right, big thanks, and I'll catch you all whenever. Probably in a few weeks when House of the Dragon's done. See you then.